your art teacher, Mr. Aguilar, and I just want to go over this quick inking exercise with you. So on this worksheet, we have a couple of things. We have 3 spheres that we're going to be hatching, cross-hatching, and scumbling, and scumbling is just a fancy way of saying scribbling. We also have this piece of petrified wood as our reference, and then we have the outline of the wood right here. I am not expecting you to mirror this in here. This is simply for you to practice drawing nice alternating curved lines with variations in thickness. So when you look at this, you have a lot of nice, interesting curved lines, and then some of them are going to be thicker, some of them are going to be thinner. Over here we have 5 trees, and the only thing I would like is for you to take slightly different approaches. So maybe one you use a scribble technique, another one you use hatching, the other one you use cross hatching. This is just a way for you to explore. This is meant to be a completely stress-free assignment. It's purely for exploration, purely for practice. On our spheres, I have a demo right here for you guys to look at. And then these, the LSs stand for light source, so they're going to indicate where the light's coming from. So on all of these, you need to have direct light and you need to have a foreshadow or the darkest shadow. So the direct light's obviously going to be the same side as the light source. I'm just going to draw a little circular shape or elliptical shape. You don't have to worry about it looking too nice. It's just there so we have a visual reference. And then I'm going to indicate where that foreshadow goes. I'm not going to draw the foreshadow out. I'm just going to indicate where it is. And the other thing, and when this is done, you can simply just erase the pencil and you won't even see it because we're working in ink. Last couple of things before we move on. One, when I start doing these, I'm going to take the camera off and I'm going to speed up the film and then just do a voiceover for some of the techniques I'm using. The other thing that I want to go over is the type of pens that we can use. So ideally what you would like is you would like a multi-liner pen set. These sets range from really thin lines to your thicker lines. So if you struggle with hand control, you can simply pick the pens for the thin lines, pick the pens for the medium lines, and pick the pens for the thicker lines. If you don't have access to these, you can use the regular pen. This is a Papermate ballpoint pen, which is fine, but it's not ideal. Okay, so we can do this with the inks. Really don't flow on these. And what we do prefer is having a pen that flows. So this is an art pen. You can find these in art stores. Sometimes you'll see them carry like in Michael's and Hobby Lobby. But these pens are nice. Ink flows off these really good. However, it is hard to get thin, crisp lines with these unless you have a lot of control. So these aren't very ideal, especially if you struggle with a little bit of hand control. The pen that I'm going to recommend would be something like a Uniball pen. The ink's waterproof, the ink flows out from the tip, and you can get some really nice fine lines. And then if you want thicker lines, you simply go over it again. And then probably the most preferred thing that you could use would be a quill pen. And quill pens will look some variation of this, and there's different types of nibs that you can buy. But this, you can get really super thin lines, and you can get thicker lines simply by adding pressure. The drawback is you constantly have to fill it, and you're at risk for splatter. But for this exercise, we are just going to use the Uniball pen. So again, as we go over this, I'm going to do a voiceover on the techniques, and I'll probably have the camera zoom in. So I'll see you at the end of this video.
Okay, so this first one we're going to do hatching. The thing about hatching is it's single lines. Some of the lines can double up on each other to make thicker, but they shouldn't cross. So they can overlap, but they shouldn't cross. And basically, the fewer lines you have, the lighter it'll appear. The more lines you have, the darker it will appear. Also, by spacing the lines closer together, it'll optically appear darker. So we are using black ink, so black is black. So how do you make something appear darker and how do you make something appear lighter when you're dealing with black ink? And it's all about optical illusions. So in all of these cases, the rule is the more lines you have and the closer they're spaced together, the darker it'll appear. And the fewer lines you have and the more spacing you have, the lighter it'll appear. The next one is cross hatching, so it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just like hatching, except the lines cross each other. Cross hatching for me is a little bit more difficult, and sorry I went off camera, than it is for regular hatching. I would say if you're going to use cross hatching in your illustration, you should definitely practice, and you should practice with purpose. So if you're doing something specific, you should practice whatever it is. So if you're drawing something, let's say like animal horns, like on a rhino or a ram, you should really practice doing that with the technique that you want. And then the last technique is going to be the scumbling technique, which is basically just scribbling. And unfortunately, I went off camera a little bit on this, so I apologize on that. But again, on all of these, the same rule applies. More means darker, less means lighter. And that's something to keep in mind. I always go too light on the light side because I can simply add more ink. When you go too dark, you have to start over. So always go on the lighter side, and then just add as you need it. On this right here, I'm indicating some lines with the pencil just to make it a little bit easier to flow. I'm actually going to switch to that quill pen too, because this pen only has one thickness. So the best tool to get where you have just one tool and you want a bunch of different types of line is going to be a quill pen. You can use some of the felt tip or brush pens that are out there in the market, but they require a lot of hand control and a lot of patience, and you have to slow down quite a bit to get thin lines. Whereas with the quill pen, you can move fairly fast. And I did as much as I can with this pen, and the lines were just a little bit too thick for what I wanted to show. So eventually I just switched to a quill pen just to show how you can get some thin lines. And you can find quill pens at any art store. You can find it at Michael's. Go on Amazon and order some nice quill pens. There's really cheap versions and there's really nice versions. I'd always recommend going for the really nice versions because they're not that expensive. And they last forever if you take care of them. So the pen holder's like $9. The nibs actually cost the most, but you get a lot of them. So like one of these plus a bottle of ink, they'll last you a year, maybe longer. And then I'm going to be using a couple of different techniques for doing the trees. So this is my advice, is don't use one technique to do all these trees. So like on this one, I'm going to do a little bit of stippling for the leaves. You want to try to do as many techniques as possible to see what you like and what you don't like. Don't worry about this looking nice. The goal of this exercise is not to make this sheet look nice. The goal of the exercise is to practice, figure out what works, what doesn't work, what you like and what you don't like. So always keep that in mind anytime we're doing any practice exercises like this, which are different than our demos. Our demos are usually how-to techniques. On this one, it is application of technique and then figuring out what works and doesn't work, or figuring out, hey, I need to practice this more because I'm not where I need to be for my project that I want to do. Again, the really only drawback about these pens is you got to clean them all the time, and then you got to refill ink all the time. And then now I'm going back in with the Uniball pen. So again, you can see the difference in the thickness of the line and the amount of ink that goes onto the paper. This one is more of a scribble technique. And each technique is going to have its own unique characteristics. The one thing I'm going to preach against, which I did for this, is slow down. I did these as fast as possible to make the video as short as possible, and then sped it up to make it even shorter. So just take your time, get what you want out of it, practice, and then whatever you think you need to work on, practice some more.
Just to wrap this up, this is a finished example of the inking worksheet. Again, The main purpose of this is simply practicing using ink. If it turns out great, it's fine. If it turns out bad, it's also fine. Your main goal is to figure out how to ink what you're doing, what works, what doesn't work. And if you do find a technique that you like, you're probably going to have to practice more. So just consider this tutorial as a starting point of what you can do. And if there's something that you like, you should practice it more before starting on your final. The other thing you want to keep in mind is when you're working, it doesn't matter whether it's watercolor, pencil, ink, pastel, it doesn't matter the medium. You should always have a spare sheet next to you that you can do warm-up activities on, that you can wipe off excess ink, wipe off excess paint, anything on the side that you might be able to practice something like, I'm thinking about doing this type of texture, will it work? Do it on a separate piece of paper before you work on your final project. And until next time, this is your art teacher, Mr. Aguilar, and have a good day.